The ice cracked beneath Beatrice Palmer's boots with a sound like gunfire, and in that terrible instant, she knew she was going to die in the freezing waters of Silver Creek Lake. It was December 1881, and the Wyoming Territory had been gripped by one of the coldest winters anyone could remember. Beatrice had been foolish to venture across the lake. She knew that now, but the shortcut would have saved her nearly 2 hours on horseback, and she desperately needed to reach Castle Dome before nightfall. Her father was waiting for medicine she had traveled all the way to Lander to fetch. Medicine that might save his life after the pneumonia had settled deep into his lungs. None of that mattered now as the ice gave way completely, and she plunged into water so cold it felt like 1,000 knives stabbing into her flesh. She tried to scream, but the shock stole her breath, and the heavy wool coat that had kept her warm during the ride now became a deadly weight, dragging her down into the dark depths. Her fingers scrambled at the edge of the ice, but it kept breaking away in her hands, crumbling like old bread. The world above the water seemed to fade, the weak December sun becoming nothing more than a pale suggestion of light. Her limbs grew heavy, and a strange warmth began to spread through her body, a deceptive comfort that whispered she should just let go, just sink down and rest. Then strong hands grabbed her by the shoulders. Vincent Mallory had been tracking a wounded elk when he heard the crack echo across the frozen landscape. He had urged his horse, Thunder, into a gallop without thinking, his heart pounding as he realized what that sound meant. Someone had gone through the ice. He reached the shore of Silver Creek Lake just in time to see a dark shape struggling in the water, already beginning to sink beneath the surface. Vincent did not hesitate. He kicked off his boots and coat and ran across the ice, testing each step, moving as quickly as he dared toward the jagged hole. When he reached it, he could barely see the woman beneath the surface, her eyes closed, her face pale as death. He plunged his arms into the water, gasping at the brutal cold, and grabbed hold of her coat. She was deadweight in his grip, but he pulled with all his strength, dragging her up and out of the water. The ice groaned beneath their combined weight. Vincent spread himself flat, distributing his mass, and pulled her across his body, then began to inch backward toward the shore. It took an eternity, each movement careful and deliberate, the woman's soaked body leaving a trail of water that froze almost instantly. His arms screamed with the effort, his hands so cold they had gone numb, but he did not let go. When they finally reached solid ground, Vincent wasted no time. The woman was unconscious, her lips blue, her skin like ice. He had seen men die of exposure before, knew how quickly the cold could kill. He scooped her into his arms and ran to where Thunder waited, his faithful bay gelding stamping nervously in the snow. Vincent's cabin was only a mile away, but it was the longest mile he had ever traveled. He held the woman against his chest, trying to share what little warmth his body still held, urging Thunder faster. The horse seemed to sense the urgency and moved with a smooth, rapid gait despite the treacherous footing. The cabin appeared through the trees, a small but sturdy structure Vincent had built himself 2 years ago when he decided to leave his wandering days behind and settle in this remote corner of Wyoming. He practically fell from the saddle, kicking open the door and carrying the woman inside. The fire had burned down to embers, but Vincent had it roaring again within minutes. He grabbed every blanket he owned and began to strip away the woman's wet clothing, his movements quick and efficient, thinking only of survival. He had helped deliver calves in snowstorms and pulled his own brother from a frozen river once, long ago. He knew hypothermia, knew its signs and its dangers. He wrapped her in the dry blankets and pulled her close to the fire, then set about warming water and gathering what medical supplies he had. Her breathing was shallow. Her heart beat faint when he pressed his fingers to her throat, but she was alive. That was what mattered. Vincent removed his own wet clothes and pulled on dry ones, then prepared warm broth from the venison stew he had made the day before. He sat beside the woman and carefully tipped small amounts of the liquid between her lips, massaging her throat to encourage swallowing. Most of it ran down her chin, but some went down, and that was a start. Hours passed. Vincent never left her side, continually checking her breathing, adjusting the blankets, adding wood to the fire. The winter darkness fell early, and outside the wind picked up, howling around the cabin like a living thing. Snow began to fall, heavy and thick, the kind of storm that could last for days. As midnight approached, the woman's eyes finally fluttered open. Beatrice's first sensation was warmth, blessed warmth, and she clung to it like a lifeline. Slowly, awareness returned. She was in a strange place, wrapped in blankets, lying on a floor near a fire. A man sat beside her, a tin cup in his hands, his face lined with exhaustion and worry. "Easy," he said softly when she tried to sit up. "You have been through an ordeal. Take your time." His voice was deep and gentle, with a slight drawl that spoke of time spent in the Southern Territories. Beatrice focused on his face, trying to make sense of what had happened. He was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair that hung to his collar and eyes the color of weathered leather. His face was handsome in a rough way, all sharp angles and sun-bronzed skin with a few days' worth of beard shadowing his jaw. "The lake," Beatrice whispered, her voice hoarse. "I fell through." "Yes," Vincent said. "I pulled you out. You have been unconscious for hours. I was beginning to worry you might not wake up." Beatrice tried to sit up again, and this time he helped her, supporting her back with one strong arm while arranging blankets around her shoulders. She became suddenly aware that she was wearing a man's shirt, far too large for her and nothing else but her undergarments. Heat flooded her cheeks. "Your clothes were soaked," Vincent explained, his own face coloring slightly. "I had to get you out of them. I promise I was nothing but respectful." "I believe you," Beatrice said, and she did. There was something inherently trustworthy about this man, something in the directness of his gaze and the gentleness of his hands. "You saved my life. I cannot fault you for that. What were you doing out there?" Vincent asked, handing her the cup of broth. "That ice has been unstable for weeks. Anyone local would know not to cross it." Beatrice sipped the broth, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I am from Castle Dome, but I had been to Lander for medicine. My father is ill, very ill. I thought I could save time by crossing the lake." She looked around suddenly, panic rising in her chest. "The medicine, my saddlebags. Your horse ran off when you went through the ice," Vincent said gently. "I am sorry. I looked for it after I got you settled, but with the storm coming in, I could not track it far." Despair washed over Beatrice. All that effort, all that expense, and now her father would die because she had been foolish and impatient. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Vincent reached out hesitantly, then patted her shoulder with awkward kindness. "Do not give up hope yet. Your horse might find its way to Castle Dome on its own. Animals have good instincts, and when the storm clears, I will help you search." "Castle Dome is 20 miles from here," Beatrice said through her tears. "Even if we found my horse, it could take days. My father does not have days." "Then we will ride hard when the weather breaks," Vincent said firmly. "I have a good horse and knowledge of every trail in these mountains. We will get you home." Beatrice looked at him, this stranger who had risked his own life for hers and was now promising to help her further. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not even know me." Vincent was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "I know what it is like to lose someone you love," he finally said. My brother died 5 years ago, froze to death after his horse threw him in a blizzard. I searched for 3 days before I found him. It was too late by then." He met her eyes. "If I can help you save your father, then maybe that means something." The raw pain in his voice touched something deep inside Beatrice. She reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "I am Beatrice Palmer," she said, "and I am in your debt." "Vincent Mallory," he replied. "And you owe me nothing but your good health. Now you should rest. Your body has been through a terrible shock." But Beatrice could not rest, despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept circling back to her father, lying in his bed in Castle Dome, waiting for medicine that might not come. She told Vincent about him, about how he had raised her alone after her mother died in childbirth when Beatrice was only 10 years old. How he had taught her to ride and shoot and survive in this harsh land. How he had never remarried, saying his heart belonged to his late wife and no other. Vincent listened, asking occasional questions, keeping the fire fed and the broth warm. As the night wore on, Beatrice found herself asking about him in return. He told her he had been a ranch hand, drifting from Montana down to Colorado, working wherever he could find employment. His brother Thomas had been his closest companion, the two of them traveling together after their parents died of cholera. "After I lost Thomas, I could not keep drifting," Vincent said. "It felt wrong, moving from place to place with no roots, no purpose. So I came here, built this cabin, and started trapping. It is a lonely life, but it is peaceful." "Do you ever wish for more?" Beatrice asked. Vincent glanced at her and something flickered in his eyes, something warm and uncertain. "Sometimes," he admitted, "especially during the long winters. But I have not had much luck with people. Animals are simpler, more honest." "People can be honest too," Beatrice said softly, "when they want to be." They talked through the night, their conversation flowing easily despite being strangers. Beatrice found herself drawn to Vincent's quiet strength, his thoughtful way of speaking, the sadness that lurked behind his eyes. He had been hurt by life, that much was clear, but he had not let it make him bitter or cruel. Instead, he had retreated into solitude, building walls around his heart. Beatrice understood walls. She had built plenty of her own. By the time dawn broke, the snow was falling so heavily that Vincent could barely see thunder in his small stable 20 feet from the cabin. The storm had settled in with a vengeance, and they were trapped for the foreseeable future. "I am sorry," Vincent said, standing at the window and watching the white curtain of snow. "In weather like this, traveling would be suicide. We will have to wait it out." Beatrice joined him at the window, wrapped in blankets, her long auburn hair hanging loose around her shoulders. Vincent had given her a pair of his wool socks to wear, and they were comically large on her feet. "I understand," she said, though her voice was tight with worry. "There is nothing to be done about the weather." "Your father is a strong man," Vincent said. "You said he survived being mauled by a bear 10 years ago. A man like that does not give up easily." "I hope you are right," Beatrice whispered. They fell into an easy routine over the next 2 days. Vincent insisted Beatrice rest as much as possible, but she refused to be an idle guest. She helped prepare meals, mended a tear in his spare coat, and even won a spirited argument about doing the dishes. Vincent watched her move around his cabin with a mixture of amusement and something deeper, something he was not quite ready to name. Beatrice Palmer was nothing like the few women he had courted in his younger days. Those had been saloon girls mostly, pretty but shallow, interested only in a good time and whatever money he had in his pockets. Beatrice was different. She was intelligent and capable, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh more than he had in years. She was also beautiful, though he tried not to think about that too much. tried not to notice the way firelight played across her features or how her eyes sparkled when she smiled. On the second evening, as they sat by the fire eating rabbit stew, Beatrice asked him about the scars on his hands. Vincent looked down at them, at the network of white lines crisscrossing his knuckles and palms. "Hazards of the trade," he said with a shrug. "Trapping is not gentle work, and before that I broke horses for a while. They were not always cooperative." "You have done many things," Beatrice observed. "I have tried many things," Vincent corrected. "There is a difference. Trying something does not mean you were good at it." "Were you good at breaking horses?" Vincent smiled slightly. "Actually, yes. I have always understood animals better than people. They communicate honestly, you know. A horse tells you exactly what it is thinking and feeling. You just have to learn its language." "And what is Thunder's language?" Beatrice asked. "Thunder is stubborn and proud, but loyal once he decides you are worthy of his trust. He does not give his affection easily, but when he does, it is forever." Vincent paused, then added quietly, "I suppose we are alike in that way." Beatrice met his eyes across the fire, and the air between them seemed to thicken. "I think that is a good quality," she said softly. "Better than giving your trust too easily and being disappointed." "Have you been disappointed often?" Vincent asked. "Often enough," Beatrice admitted. "I was engaged once 3 years ago. His name was Richard, and he was the son of a wealthy rancher from Laramie. Everyone said it was a good match. He was handsome and charming, and I thought I loved him." She laughed bitterly. "Then I discovered he had been courting me only to get access to my father's land. He wanted to expand his father's holdings, and our property adjoined theirs. When I confronted him, he did not even bother to deny it. He said marriage was a business arrangement, and I was foolish to expect romance." Vincent's jaw tightened. He was the foolish one. "Perhaps," Beatrice said, "but the experience taught me to be cautious. I have not let anyone close since then. It seemed easier to keep my distance, to focus on helping my father run our ranch rather than risk my heart again." "Loneliness is a high price to pay for safety," Vincent said quietly. "So is heartbreak," Beatrice countered. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Vincent spoke again. "I have been lonely for a long time," he admitted. "After Thomas died, I told myself I preferred solitude. But talking with you these past 2 days, I realize I have just been afraid. Afraid to care about someone again, afraid to lose them like I lost him." Beatrice felt her heart constrict. She moved closer to him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Fear is a natural thing," she said, "but we cannot let it rule our lives. Otherwise, what is the point of living at all?" Vincent turned to look at her, and the firelight caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "You are very wise," he said. "Not wise," Beatrice replied. "Just tired of being afraid." Something shifted between them in that moment, some invisible barrier crumbling. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, rough and warm, and Beatrice leaned into the touch without thinking. "Beatrice," Vincent said, his voice rough. "Yes, I am glad I found you," he said. "Even though the circumstances were terrible, I am glad." "I am glad too," Beatrice whispered. Vincent started to lean toward her, then stopped himself, pulling back. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice deliberately light. "The storm should break tomorrow, and we will have a long ride ahead of us." Beatrice felt a flash of disappointment but nodded. She was not ready either, not really. There was too much uncertainty, too much at stake. Her father's life hung in the balance, and she could not afford distractions, no matter how appealing they might be. But as she lay wrapped in blankets near the fire that night, pretending to sleep, she could not stop thinking about the way Vincent had looked at her, the gentleness in his touch. Her heart, which she had thought frozen solid after Richard's betrayal, was beginning to thaw. The storm broke just before dawn on the third day. Vincent was up early, checking on Thunder and preparing supplies for their journey. When Beatrice emerged from the cabin, dressed in her own clothes which had finally dried, he had 2 horses saddled and ready. The second horse was a smaller mare, dappled gray and gentle-eyed. "This is Dove," Vincent said. "She is getting on in years, but she is sure-footed and reliable. You can ride her to Castle Dome." "Will you not need her?" Beatrice asked. "I have Thunder," Vincent said simply. "And I am coming with you, remember. I promise to help you search for your horse and get you home safely." "Vincent, you have already done so much. I cannot ask you to leave your home and travel all that way." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "You are not asking, I am offering. And before you argue further, you should know I am a stubborn man. Once I have made up my mind about something, I do not change it easily." Despite her worry about her father, Beatrice felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Thank you," she said. "Truly, thank you." They set out as soon as the horses were ready, following the trails Vincent knew by heart. The snow was deep, sometimes reaching the horses' chests, and progress was slow. Vincent led the way, using Thunder's strength to break a path for Dove to follow. They stopped frequently to rest the animals, and during those breaks, they shared jerky and cold biscuits and talked. Beatrice told Vincent more about Castle Dome, describing the small town that had sprung up around the mining operations in the area. It was not a large settlement, perhaps 300 souls, but it had a general store, a doctor, a saloon, and even a small church. Her father owned a ranch on the outskirts, running cattle and horses on land that had been in her mother's family. "What does the doctor say about your father's condition?" Vincent asked as they sat beneath a stand of pine trees, the horses cropping at exposed grass. "Dr. Harrison said pneumonia at his age is very dangerous," Beatrice said quietly. "He gave him what medicine he had, but it was not enough. That is why I went to Lander. They have a larger pharmacy there, and Dr. Harrison said there was a new treatment, something from back east. It was expensive, but I did not care. I would spend every penny I had to save my father." "We will get you home," Vincent said firmly. "And we will find your horse. I am a good tracker. Even with the new snow, there should be signs." They found the horse just after midday, standing in a shallow ravine, still wearing its saddle and saddlebags. The animal was cold and hungry, but otherwise unharmed. Beatrice nearly wept with relief when she saw that the saddlebags were intact, the precious medicine still safely packed inside. "Thank God," she breathed, pressing her forehead against the horse's neck. "Thank God." Vincent checked the animal over carefully, making sure it had not injured itself in its flight. "He is fine," he pronounced. "A bit rattled, but fine." "What is his name?" "Copper," Beatrice said, stroking the horse's chestnut coat. "He was my mother's horse originally. He is old now, but still spirited." With Copper found and the medicine secure, they continued their journey with renewed urgency. The sun was beginning to set when Castle Dome finally came into view, a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley between steep hillsides. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from a distance, Beatrice could hear the faint sounds of activity. They rode straight through town, Beatrice barely acknowledging the curious stares they received. Vincent followed her to a ranch house about a mile past the last buildings, a sturdy structure with a barn and several outbuildings. Beatrice was off Copper before the horse had fully stopped, running toward the house with the saddlebags in her arms. Vincent dismounted more slowly, holding the reins of all 3 horses and feeling suddenly uncertain. This was Beatrice's world, her home, and he was an outsider. He had fulfilled his promise to get her here safely. Perhaps now it was time to leave, to return to his cabin and his solitary life. But he found he did not want to leave. Not yet. The front door opened and Beatrice appeared, her face flushed. "Please come in," she called. "There is a stable around back for the horses. My father wants to meet you." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "He is awake, barely, but yes, and he insists." Vincent tended to the horses first, making sure they were fed and watered and brushed down. By the time he entered the house, full dark had fallen. The interior was warm and surprisingly spacious, with well-made furniture and curtains on the windows. This was no rough frontier dwelling but a real home, built with care and meant to last. Beatrice met him in the main room and led him down a hallway to a bedroom. A man lay in the bed, propped up on pillows, his face gaunt and gray but his eyes sharp. He was perhaps 60 years old, with white hair and the weathered skin of someone who had spent his life outdoors. "You must be the man who saved my daughter," he said, his voice weak but steady. "Vincent Mallory, is it?" "Yes, sir," Vincent said, removing his hat. "Though Beatrice has been telling me you are the truly strong one. Fighting off pneumonia is no small feat." "I am a stubborn old coot," John Palmer said with a faint smile. "Takes more than some lung sickness to kill me, but I would not have lasted much longer without that medicine. Dr. Harrison has already been here and says I should make a full recovery, thanks to you getting my daughter home safely." "I only did what anyone would have done," Vincent said. "No," John said firmly. "Most men would have stayed safely on shore and minded their own business. You risked your life for a stranger. That says something about your character." Vincent shifted uncomfortably. He had never been good at accepting praise. "I am just glad I was there at the right time." John studied him for a long moment, then glanced at his daughter. "Beatrice, go prepare some food for our guest. He has had a long journey and he looks half-starved." Beatrice looked like she wanted to argue but nodded and left the room. Vincent made to follow her, but John spoke again. "Wait," the older man said. "I want a word with you alone." Vincent turned back, suddenly wary. John gestured to a chair beside the bed and Vincent sat, still holding his hat in his hands. "My daughter thinks I am too weak to notice things, but I am not," John said. "I see the way she looks at you, and the way you look at her." Vincent felt heat rise in his face. "Sir, I assure you I have been nothing but respectful." "I know," John said. "That is why I am talking to you instead of throwing you out. I have known a lot of men in my life, Vincent Mallory, and I have gotten good at reading them. You are a good man. A lonely man, maybe, carrying some old hurts, but good at your core." "I try to be," Vincent said quietly. "My daughter has been hurt too," John continued. "Some fool boy broke her heart a few years back, and she has been keeping everyone at arm's length ever since. But I see something different in her now, something I have not seen in a long time. She is letting herself feel again, and I think that is because of you." Vincent did not know what to say to that. The idea that Beatrice might feel something for him, something real, made his heart race and his palms sweat like he was a boy again. "I am going to recover," John said. "Dr. Harrison is confident of that, which means Beatrice will not need to stay here every moment caring for me. She will have time for her own life, her own happiness. I think you could make her happy, Vincent. More importantly, I think she could make you happy. So I am asking you not to run away, not to hide behind excuses or fear. Stay in Castle Dome for a while. Give it a chance." "I barely know her," Vincent protested weakly. "Then get to know her," John said. "What do you have waiting for you back in that cabin? A lonely winter and an empty bed. That is no kind of life for a young man." Vincent thought about his cabin, about the silence that filled it, about going days without hearing another human voice. Then he thought about the past 3 days with Beatrice, the easy conversations and shared laughter, the way she had felt in his arms when he pulled her from the lake. "I would like to stay," he admitted, "but I do not know what I would do here. I am a trapper and a horse breaker, not a town dweller." "I could use help on the ranch," John said. "I am not as young as I used to be, and even after I recover, Dr. Harrison says I need to take things easier. I need someone I can trust, someone who knows animals and hard work. It would not be charity. I would pay a fair wage and provide room and board. And if things develop between you and my daughter, well, that would just be a bonus." Vincent hesitated. Everything was moving so fast. 5 days ago, he had been alone in his cabin, content with his solitary existence. Now he was being offered a job, a place to stay, and possibly something more with a woman who had already started to work her way past his defenses. It was terrifying. It was also tempting. "Let me think about it," Vincent finally said. "This is a big decision." "Fair enough," John said. "But do not think too long. Life is short, Vincent. We do not get unlimited chances at happiness." When Vincent emerged from the bedroom, he found Beatrice in the kitchen, stirring a pot of stew on the stove. She looked up when he entered, and he saw worry in her eyes. "What did my father say to you?" she asked. "He offered me a job," Vincent said. Beatrice's eyes widened. "He did what?" "He said he needs help on the ranch and wondered if I might be interested in staying." "And what did you say?" Vincent crossed the room until he stood close to her, close enough to smell the soap she used and see the flecks of green in her hazel eyes. "I said I would think about it." "But I have a question for you first." "What question?" "Do you want me to stay?" Vincent asked quietly. "Because your father seems to think there is something between us, something worth exploring, but I need to know if that is what you want too. If you are just grateful that I pulled you from the lake, that is fine. I do not expect anything from you. But if there is more, if you feel what I think I am feeling, then I need to know before I make any decisions." Beatrice set down her spoon carefully, her hands trembling slightly. "What do you think you are feeling?" she asked. "Like I have been asleep for 5 years and suddenly woke up," Vincent said. "Like my cabin is not home anymore because home might be wherever you are. Like I want to know everything about you, every story, every dream, every fear." He paused, then added more softly, "Like I am falling in love with you, Beatrice Palmer, and it scares me to death." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "I am scared too," she whispered. "I swore I would never let anyone close again. I thought my heart was too damaged, too scarred. But then you came out of nowhere and saved my life, and you have been kind and patient and real with me in a way no one else has ever been. I think I am falling in love with you too, Vincent Mallory, and I do not know what to do about it." Vincent reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away the tears that had started to fall. "We could start by admitting that we are both terrified and broken but may be willing to try anyway," he suggested. "That sounds reasonable," Beatrice said with a watery laugh. "And then maybe I could kiss you," Vincent said. "If that would be acceptable." "That would be very acceptable," Beatrice breathed. Vincent leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. The kiss was everything he had imagined and more, sweet and warm and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I will stay," Vincent said. "I will take your father's job and stay in Castle Dome, and we will take this slow, get to know each other properly. No rushing, no pressure. We will see where this leads." "That sounds perfect," Beatrice said, then pulled him down for another kiss. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Vincent moved into the small cabin on the Palmer property that had once housed the ranch foreman, who had moved on the year before. It was comfortable and private, with a stove and a real bed and windows that looked out over the mountains. He threw himself into the work of running the ranch, helping to feed the cattle, repair fences damaged by winter storms, and break in a new batch of horses John had purchased the previous fall. He was good at the work, better than good, and John Palmer watched approvingly as his ranch began to run more smoothly than it had in months. The other ranch hands, two younger men named Samuel and Peter, quickly came to respect Vincent's knowledge and easy way with animals. But the work, as satisfying as it was, paled in comparison to the time Vincent spent with Beatrice. They courted properly, the way people did in small towns where everyone watched and gossiped. Vincent called on her in the main house, sitting in the parlor while John read nearby, supposedly paying them no attention but clearly listening to every word. They went on supervised picnics with John or the ranch cook, a formidable woman named Martha, always in attendance. They attended church together on Sundays, sitting in the Palmer family pew while the rest of the congregation stared and whispered. Vincent found he did not care about the whispers. Let them talk. He had found something precious, something worth protecting. As January gave way to February, and John Palmer continued to recover his strength, the supervision began to relax. Vincent and Beatrice were allowed to take rides together across the ranch property, just the two of them and the wide Wyoming sky. They talked about everything during those rides, sharing dreams and fears, memories both bitter and sweet. Vincent told her about his childhood in Missouri, about parents who had loved him and Thomas fiercely, until cholera took them both in the same week. About how he and his brother had struck out west, looking for adventure and opportunity. About the guilt he still carried over Thomas's death, the feeling that he should have somehow prevented it. Beatrice told him about growing up without a mother, about the loneliness of being the only girl on a ranch full of men, about her engagement to Richard and the humiliation of discovering his true motives, about the fear she lived with every day, knowing her father was getting older and one day she would be truly alone. "You will never be alone again," Vincent promised her one afternoon as they sat on a hilltop overlooking the ranch. "Not if I have anything to say about it." "That is a big promise," Beatrice said. "I am a man who keeps his promises," Vincent replied. In early March, Vincent asked John Palmer for permission to marry his daughter. They were in the barn, checking on a mare who was close to foaling, when Vincent gathered his courage and spoke. "Sir, I would like to ask for Beatrice's hand in marriage." John did not look surprised. He finished examining the mare, then straightened and fixed Vincent with a measuring look. "You love her." "With everything I am," Vincent said simply, "and you will be good to her. Protect her, respect her, be faithful to her." "Until my last breath," Vincent vowed. John smiled, the first genuine smile Vincent had seen from the older man. "Then you have my blessing. Though you should know if you hurt her, I will shoot you myself." "Pneumonia has not made me too weak to pull a trigger." "I would expect nothing less," Vincent said. He proposed to Beatrice that evening, taking her for a walk after supper to their favorite spot by the creek. The ice had begun to thaw, and the water gurgled over rocks, a sound of spring and renewal. Vincent got down on one knee in the mud, not caring about his pants, and pulled out a simple gold ring he had purchased in town with nearly all his savings. "Beatrice Palmer, you have brought light into my life when I thought there would only be darkness. You have shown me that it is possible to love again, to hope again. Will you marry me?" Beatrice was crying, but they were happy tears, tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, pouring all his love and hope into that kiss. They were married in late April, when the wildflowers covered the hills and the aspens were just beginning to leaf out. The wedding took place in the small church in Castle Dome, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Beatrice wore a dress that had been her mother's, ivory lace over silk, preserved carefully all these years. Vincent wore a new suit, black with a string tie, and he had gotten his hair cut for the occasion, though he had refused to shave his beard. John Palmer walked his daughter down the aisle, his face full of pride and barely concealed emotion. When he placed Beatrice's hand in Vincent's, he whispered, "Take care of her." "Always," Vincent whispered back. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death parted them. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed his bride to cheers and applause from the assembled crowd. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. Martha had outdone herself, preparing roasted beef and chicken, fresh bread, pies, and a wedding cake that was a masterpiece of sugar and cream. There was music and dancing, and Vincent found himself swept up in it all, laughing as Beatrice taught him the steps to dances he had never learned. As the sun set and the party continued around them, Vincent and Beatrice slipped away to the small cabin that was now their home. Vincent had spent the past week fixing it up, adding shelves and a new quilt on the bed, hanging curtains Beatrice had sewn. It was not much, but it was theirs. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches. They took their time learning each other, discovering what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp and sigh. When they finally came together, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, two halves becoming whole. Afterward, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Beatrice traced the scars on Vincent's chest, old injuries from his years of hard living. "I love you," she said softly. "I love everything about you, even the parts that hurt." "I love you too," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Mallory." She smiled at the name, her new name. "That is going to take some getting used to." "We have a lifetime to get used to it," Vincent said. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Ranching was hard work, made harder by a drought that summer that left the grass brown and the water sources low. There were also the normal adjustments of learning to live with another person, of merging two lives into one. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration, but they always talked through them, always remembered the love that had brought them together. John Palmer became stronger as the months passed, though he was content to let Vincent take on more and more of the ranch's management. He spent his time training horses, something he had always loved, and doting on his daughter and son-in-law. He told Vincent more than once that he was the son he had always wished for, and Vincent felt the absence of his own father a little less keenly when John said such things. In the spring of 1883, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent one evening after supper, her face glowing with excitement and nerves. Vincent picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down carefully as if she might break. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Beatrice laughed. "You do not need to treat me like I am fragile." But Vincent could not help being protective. He insisted she do less around the ranch, hiring a woman from town to help with the housework despite Beatrice's protests. He fretted over her diet, making sure she ate plenty of meat and vegetables. At night, he would lay his hand on her belly and talk to the baby, telling it stories about the mountains and the animals that lived there. "The baby cannot hear you yet," Beatrice said, amused. "How do you know?" Vincent challenged. "Maybe he can, or she. I just want our child to know my voice." Their son was born on a cold December day, almost exactly 2 years after Vincent had pulled Beatrice from the frozen lake. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Vincent feared he might lose both Beatrice and the baby. He paced outside the bedroom while Martha and the doctor worked inside, praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. When he finally heard the baby's cry, thin and indignant, he nearly collapsed with relief. Martha emerged a few minutes later, grinning broadly. "You have a son," she announced, "and your wife is tired but well." Vincent rushed into the room. Beatrice lay in the bed, pale and exhausted, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when he entered, and her smile was radiant. "Meet your son," she said softly. Vincent approached almost reverently and looked down at the baby. He was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. Vincent felt something shift in his chest, a love so overwhelming it was almost painful. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. They named him Thomas, after Vincent's brother. John Palmer cried when they told him, touched beyond words. He held his grandson with shaking hands and declared him the finest baby in the territory. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, Vincent marveled at the way life could change, how something that started with near tragedy could blossom into such joy. He watched his son take his first steps, say his first words, ride his first pony. He taught Thomas about horses and cattle, about respecting the land and the animals that lived on it. Beatrice bloomed as a mother, patient and loving but also firm when needed. She taught Thomas his letters and numbers, read him stories, sang him songs. She and Vincent were partners in every sense, running the ranch together, raising their child together, building a life that was richer than either had imagined possible. When Thomas was 3, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the summer of 1886, they welcomed a daughter into the world. They named her Rose, after Beatrice's mother, and she had her mother's auburn hair and her father's brown eyes. John Palmer lived long enough to meet Rose, holding her with the same tenderness he had shown Thomas. He passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months after her birth, and Vincent and Beatrice mourned him deeply, but took comfort in knowing he had died happy, surrounded by the family he loved. The ranch became entirely theirs then, a responsibility and a gift. Vincent proved to be a skilled manager, expanding their herd and earning a reputation for breeding excellent horses. Beatrice handled the business side, keeping the books and negotiating sales with a sharp mind that impressed even the most skeptical buyers. They added on to their cabin as their family grew, building more rooms, a larger kitchen, a proper dining area. It would never be a grand house like some of the wealthier ranchers built, but it was warm and welcoming, filled with laughter and love. Thomas and Rose grew up healthy and happy, learning to ride almost before they could walk. Thomas was serious and thoughtful like his father, while Rose was spirited and adventurous like her mother. They fought and played and drove their parents to distraction, but Vincent and Beatrice would not have traded them for anything. On December evenings, when the snow fell soft and silent outside, Vincent would sometimes think back to that day at the frozen lake. He thought about how close he had come to staying home that morning, to letting someone else find Beatrice or not find her at all. He thought about how one decision, one moment of courage had led to everything he now held dear. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice would ask, snuggling close to him on the settee while the children played nearby. "About how lucky I am," Vincent would reply. "About how you changed everything." "We changed everything," Beatrice would correct. "You saved my life that day, Vincent, but I think maybe I saved yours too. We rescued each other." And Vincent would have to agree that she was right. He had pulled her from frozen water, yes, but she had pulled him from something far colder, the isolation he had wrapped around his heart. She had thawed that heart with her warmth, her laughter, her love, and shown him that life was meant to be lived fully, not hidden away from for fear of being hurt. They made it a tradition to visit the lake every December on the anniversary of the day they met, even after the children were grown and had families of their own. They would stand on the shore, hand in hand, and remember. Vincent would tell the story of the rescue again, though Beatrice had heard it 1,000 times, and she would add her own memories, the feeling of those strong hands pulling her to safety, the sound of his voice calling her back from the darkness. "I was so cold," Beatrice would say. And then suddenly there was warmth. "You are still my warmth," Vincent would reply, every single day. As the years passed and they grew old together, their love only deepened. They had built something lasting, something that would outlive them in the ranch they left to their children, in the grandchildren who carried their names and their values, in the stories told around dinner tables about the cowboy who rescued a woman from a frozen lake, and the woman who rescued him right back. On a warm summer evening in 1915, when Vincent was 64 and Beatrice 62, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Thomas ran the ranch now, with Rose's husband as his partner, and they had done Vincent and Beatrice proud. There were 7 grandchildren at last count, with another on the way, and the sound of their playing filled the air. "Did you ever imagine this?" Beatrice asked, her head resting on Vincent's shoulder. "When you pulled me from that lake?" "No," Vincent admitted. "I thought only about saving you in that moment. I did not think about falling in love or building a family. I did not think I deserved such things." And now, Vincent looked out at the land they had nurtured, at the house they had filled with love, at the family they had created together. He thought about all the years they had shared, the joys and sorrows, the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones. He thought about waking up beside Beatrice every morning for over 30 years, and knowing he would wake beside her for all the mornings to come, however many they had left. "Now I know I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Vincent said, "because I found you, because you let me love you, because you loved me back." Beatrice turned to kiss him, a kiss as sweet as their first, as passionate as their 1,000th. "We were both lucky," she said. "We found each other when we needed it most, and we built something beautiful together." As the sun dipped below the mountains and the stars began to appear, Vincent Mallory held his wife close and silently thanked whatever force of fate or providence had led him to that frozen lake on that December day so long ago. His life had changed in an instant, transformed from lonely solitude to abundant joy, and it had all started with an act of simple human kindness, with the decision to help someone in need. He had saved Beatrice's life, but she had given him a reason to live. She had thawed his frozen heart and shown him that love, real love, was worth any risk. And in return, he had given her everything he was and everything he had, built her a life filled with security and tenderness and unwavering devotion. It was a good life, a full life, better than either of them had dared to hope for. And as they sat together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the evidence of their love in every direction, they knew they had been blessed beyond measure. The children called them in for supper, and Vincent helped Beatrice to her feet, his hand steady on her arm as it always was. They walked into their home together, into the warmth and light and love that filled every corner, and closed the door on another perfect day. There would be many more such days, strung together like pearls on a string, each one precious, each one a gift. And when their time finally came, many years later, they would leave behind a legacy that had nothing to do with the ranch or the money or the land. Their true legacy was the love they had shared and the example they had set. showing everyone who knew them that even the coldest heart could be thawed, even the deepest wounds could heal, and even the loneliest soul could find home in the arms of another. Vincent and Beatrice Mallory had rescued each other in every way that mattered, and they had spent their lives being grateful for it, never taking a single moment for granted, always remembering that love was the greatest adventure of all. Their story became legend in Castle Dome, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the simplest acts of courage and kindness, and that true love, once found, can transform everything,